Welcome, Left Reckoning patrons. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, brother. How you doing?
Very well, and actually even better now that I've widened the frame out and I can notice the artwork behind you. It's a very great display.
I know. We picked this up, like pretty legendary pickup in New Orleans when we were visiting some family there. And we went into like a kind of vintage, curio shop where a guy just had a bunch of stuff. And literally this guy pulled this painting off of the truck and we had no info about it. And we just sort of snagged it from him right then and there. So
I like
at the homestead now. I really love it.
New Orleans, it does have a bit of a New Orleans vibe to it. Very cool.
That's exactly, yeah. So very happy about it. But yeah, man. Feeling good. It also like weather's starting to break here in Texas a little bit. It's still hot as hell. But the 100-degree days are behind us, which means I've been able to go outside.
Very nice. I recently bought a raincoat, a trench coat, because New York has been just getting hurricane remnants for like the past week or so. But I gotta say, I don't love anything more than being insulated but exposed at the same time to elements.
I know you got that trench coat to expose yourself, man.
Well, okay, yeah, I need to let me change the language I'm using. I'm talking about the weather here, not people walking down the street. But I like in North Dakota, I used to like when it was like winter, but I would be in my car in like basketball shorts driving with like the heat.
Dude, were you a shorts guy? Were you a shorts guy in the winter? Oh my God, that's wild.
Snap pants were just, especially for like car rides, it's like you don't want to be wearing pants the whole time, so you get your snap pants on, throw those in the back seat. But now wearing a raincoat and just letting the rain come over me and realize my clothes are fine. I need to get shoes because that's the one downside is my socks.
Yeah, you need to get some shoes, Matt. Yeah.
But some like Wellingtons. But anyway, enough about weather. We have some new friends that have entered the stage, David. And I gotta say, I feel like I'm getting a little bit more softer in my age because I would have came at these guys very hard in 2013, 2015. But we have some buddies. They go by Project Liberal, and they shared a meme. And here's this meme. First one: never ask a woman her age. This is the classic meme format. A man his salary, and a communist who builds the factories.
Huh. Okay. I mean, can you help me out with this, Matt? I'm really trying my best to get it. Okay.
I think Elon Musk builds all of his own factories. That's why he's
with the hammer. That'd be a sight. No, I mean, I guess, I think what they're trying to say is that, capitalists, pay money to somebody else to build infrastructure. Is that what they're getting at here?
I guess, yes. I mean, this is very much like the paucity of imagination, where you can't imagine any other way of funding projects besides capitalist speculators being like, oh, I have some money, I'll need this kind of return, but here it is. I'm assuming risk now. Risk that, surprisingly, given my position in life, is less than the gain I'm going to get, almost always.
It's bizarre for multiple reasons because there's two groups of workers involved in this process here, right? Right, the workers who are actually working in that factory to produce things, commodities, right? And then because of the social scheme that we have in this country, even though these people are laboring and their labor is what creates that product, because the capitalist owns the factory, the capitalist is able to appropriate the value that's created by workers, right? That's socialism 101. But there's also the alienation too that goes on with the construction workers who are literally building a big thing, a very impressive thing. And then they walk away and some other guy gets to reap in the social benefits from that for posterity, right? I don't understand the criticism at all, frankly. It's not even a good way of loking the risk argument, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing is so they have a sort of fancy logo, but the problem is this is just some dumb kids, and why I said I'm losing my we'll go to about Project Liberal here, and they're libertarians actually. So what we have here is basically the field that Dave Rubin was plowing for a long time. The classical liberal thing has been left fallow for a couple seasons, and now these boys are coming in with their crops. And Project Liberal is a grassroots organization focused on resurrecting true liberalism as a mainstream political ideology through advocacy, activism, and empowerment. They're all fun things. It's funny how much they sound like the most annoying type of like Gen Z Democrat thing too. We are driven by passion for our classical liberal values and deep-rooted belief in the power. Anyway, it's just some young kids. We might go into them some more. They do say that they support free expression, criminal justice reform, free trade, democracy, and free movement, which is an interesting addition because I think like, especially in libertarians, I don't know that I hear that emphasized as much as like some of the other things that we hear talked about by libertarians incessantly. So we'll keep an eye on them. They don't got a bunch of followers, like 10,000 or so. So it's like, how much do we really want to like start doing videos of these kids? But it's interesting to me how these things crop up because there's always going to be a desire for this. I would imagine like half of these kids' job or sort of idea, what's going on in their head is like, can we get some big donors to this?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that's so funny about this, and I won't even go and name names of some of the other organizations, but it is always funny when one of these groups pops up and everyone's like, oh, wow, look at this like new player in the field. And it's like some people bought a domain and got like a graphic design and filled out a Wix website. And like, you know, that's not like an institution. And you see this like from well-meaning people on the left too. They're like, I got the website and this is like the center for, you know, the workers' power movement or whatever the fuck. And it's just like three dudes, right? I don't know.
It's
you gotta be a little humble sometimes, is all that I'm saying. And
it's like, because like sometimes it's like Yasha Monk, and it's like, okay, this guy's like literally went to like the Tony Blair Institute for like doing neoliberalism, but then it's just like, these guys, which like, as far as like a grift goes, it's not a bad one probably for like some dumb 20-year-olds to be like, I'm interested in politics, and because I listened to one of their interviews with a guy who was like a neoliberal, a self-professed neoliberal on Twitter, and it reminds you like, these guys are like young and dumb. Like he thought neoliberal. He goes by the neoliberal of the year, and he thought neoliberal meant like you support moderate democratic policies and not just like, you know, nothing about markets, no nothing.
Well, I have some bad news for these folks. That this does not mean that capital's power is weak. It's funny because it's hilarious to me to have nostalgia for the 1990s and the early 2000s, which is what this is, right? You know, we've strayed away from like the potential of neoliberalism, a project that has failed wholeheartedly, and that doesn't mean it's being replaced with something better. But like that kind of end of history politics and worldview has just been completely eviscerated at this point. Not by the way, like some incredible argument, but by actual like material social conditions that have made that analysis weak, even for capitalists who want to use any kind of analysis to, you know, increase their power. Super. I mean, honestly, it's sad. That's the thing that's sad to me. It's sad when, you know, I'm not even old yet, and I still get sad when I see the youth, you know, trying to recreate the past.
I want to be like, come on, guys, don't. Just stop it. Like, I used to be like, you fucking asshole, you pricks. And I'm like, guys. Like, it's like I watch Love is Blind on Netflix, and it's like when I first watched that show like 5 years or so ago, it was like I was still that age of the people who go on it. And now I'm 34. If I was on that show, I would be one of the older people on it. And it's like all these like 27-year-olds is like, no one's going to love me. And it's like, bro, just relax. Like, you're taking this a little bit too seriously. You don't have perspective. You don't quite know what life is yet. Just don't make any real mistakes.
Can we talk about something really fast though, on the classical liberal thing? That is like that is the kind of guy, that is such a dumb guy thing, to learn the term classical liberal and be like, wow, that means something different than when somebody self-identifies as like a liberal in 2023. Classical liberalism is like going back to the Enlightenment. So yes, I believe in that kind of stuff, and acting like it's some kind of new radical, like they have like gone into like the library and like, dusted off some old tome. It's like, dude, this is like the bedrock of political education in this country. If you're in a political theory department, like, you are going to read the classic texts of the Enlightenment. What are you talking about that, like, you have, like, rediscovered some hidden ancient mystery and wisdom from Mr. John Locke? Bizarre shit to me.
Yeah. Well, what it kind of like looks like, because like the two guys who do this they look like more libertarian aligned, but the guy they had on is definitely like a Democrat partisan. And what might be happening here is like those groups are realizing that actually Joe Biden is kind of like delivering for us. like getting people back to work. Like there's a lot of things that like I don't think that or in the Democratic Party, like in the Manchin wing particularly, like even more so than Joe Biden. Like it reminds me of like Tim Pool and those types. They occasionally have to be like, Joe Manchin's kind of based, and it's like, well, we're not going to make that a regular part of programming. But for people who come at this just from a politics nerd point of view, like at a certain point, like it's like you don't need to be counterculture because like the mainstream of these parties are kind of delivering for you guys.
Yeah, no, those are the people in power. Like that's the ideology that's ruling and decaying in front of us. Incredible. I mean,
which is why we won't see much about the open borders stuff, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, I will say, Matt, like Cato Institute and a lot of those groups do like advocate for open borders because they want to use it to break labor.
Right.
But that's a very different kind of tack than like the kind of very nice like American like come into our country and we will welcome you kind of thing. It's like, hey, we want like poor people to come from the rest of the world so that we don't have to deal with unions in this country.
Right. Well, that actually serves to as a good transition to our next guy. We haven't been following Trump on the campaign trail. He's in Iowa here. Let's get a little taste of how our boy's campaigning. Let's see.
Hell yeah.
So, let me just restart that.
Yeah. When I got there from underwater, just Trump saying fascist is very funny to me in the first place.
Would have come into this country under this lunatic regime of fascists and communists and everything else. So I think it's a terrible, terrible thing. But when we get in, we'll be able to stop it. We have Tom Homan. We have all of the greatest people. We have such great people. If Biden went to the beach, he goes to the beach all the time. Right? Somebody's working him. He's got these consultants, and I think they think he looks good in a bathing suit.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't look good in a bathing suit. And somebody's giving him very, very bad advice. And when you look at it, and all he had to do is if he went to the beach and didn't do anything, you would have the strongest border you've ever had right now. But they decided to get rid of, stay in Mexico. We had a policy, remain in Mexico. Remain in Mexico. How good is that? And we had to do that with Mexico. You think that was easy? I went to the Mexican government. I said, we need a lot of people coming over in these caravans. I came up with that name, I think. Thousands and thousands of people heading up. But they knew, sit down, everybody. You have a couple of minutes, right? Sit down. Sit down. Whoever has a seat, whoever's lucky enough, otherwise I'm sorry. That's a little bigger crowd than we anticipated by about triple.
Of course.
But we had all of these people coming up. And I said to the Mexican government, remember, the enemy, they say, he didn't get Mexico to pay for the wall. Like hell I didn't. I got Mexico to pay for 28,000 soldiers free of charge while we're building the wall. That was more money than paying for the wall. They were there for a long time. And they didn't, they're not politically correct soldiers either. These are soldiers.
No.
Oh, yeah.
What I think is interesting about that is, we've talked with Kurt about AMLO and his, willingness to go along with U.S. directives on that sort of stuff in order to, pursue his own agenda domestically. Now, the thing that Trump says, though, like, we didn't get them to pay for a wall. We got them to pay for a bunch of troops. That, to me, is like, that's such the entire pivot to the border by all these right-wing people. Because like whether it's Vivek Ramaswamy or DeSantis, these people taking like, oh yeah, we're against the military-industrial complex. Well, where are these contracts going to come from then? One outlet is the U.S. border, which is we're just going to make that like the new sort of deployment area and demilitarized zone, and like, oh, here's where every fucking asshole military contractor can get any sort of inflated contract made. And like that's very clear. Like, so yes, like I'm like what he actually did accomplish is all this will ever accomplish, which is that soldiers are going to get stationed there, and funds that could be used for social purposes are going to be used to put like boots in the desert
to terrorize people. Yeah. I mean, I mean, at a certain point, it's like, you know, you can't really be fact checking Trump too much, right? You will get yourself caught up in a web of insanity. But yeah, I mean, you know, because the cruelest irony is that I mean, I think we might get into it a little bit later. Is that, you know, unfortunately, Biden has maintained a lot of the brutality at the border of the Trump years as well. The fact is that like nobody has approached anything that looks like a reasonable solution to this problem, and it is a problem, right? Like the thing is like there needs to be more money sent to the border, right? To house people, to get people to where they need to go, to help deal with this influx of people, because people are coming over. The courts are backed up for years at times to process asylum claims, right? So people sort of coming into this country with no resources. And they're either get bussed by Greg Abbott or Ron DeSantis to Martha's Vineyard, right? Without any kind of real plan as to what to do with people to help them out. Or, you know, they have to hang out in South Texas, where there's not as many kind of job work opportunities and social programs that are needed for these people, right? So I don't know, like this whole idea that we're like living through like the failures of Biden's super liberal immigration policy is one of the most ridiculous things when you actually see what's going on at the southern border right now. I mean, it's a horror show. And like, I guess what's so cynical about the border, I guess, is that like the Republicans are trying to make it worse because it riles up their base, and never forget this, makes a lot of money for their friends. Greg Abbott has been enriching a lot of people with Operation Lone Star. And then you have like liberals who are rightfully offended and disgusted by these stunts. And yet there is no real attempt to do something much different on their end. While both of these people are like using the horror of the border in like inverse, if that makes sense, right? Like the Republicans are like, look how many people are coming over, or look, we got a tank. Right, in Eagle Pass. Or liberals are like, oh my God, look how awful Trump's policies are, look how awful Abbott's policies are. And all this like political theater, like the victims are these human beings who are stuck in this squalor and desperate situation with no real attempt from the government or the American society at large to look out for them.
Yeah, and often like attempts, or sort of following attempts by the U.S. government to change their government, and you know, leading to them having to leave in the first place. And that's where we get to AOC on Face the Nation this morning. And you know, we have some quibbles with maybe some of the end here, but this is how we have to, like, because Biden's come in and he's maintained Title 42 and certain things like that. He's normalized processing. I guess processing has gone up for the number of people we're processing, so that's good. But again, like, that's within the current paradigm which is not going to ever like address this problem. And AOC elaborates here, I think, where this message actually needs to go if we're going to get there. And this is specifically on Venezuela. Let me make that a little bit louder.
I definitely think that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that we aren't constantly doing this patchwork policy extensions. That has not happened for decades. But additionally, I think we also need to examine the root of this problem, because if we are constantly engaging in foreign policy that drives people to our southern border. In this specific instance, U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and precipitated, certainly took a large part in the driving of populations to our southern border. Shortly after those sanctions, those broad-based sanctions.
You're talking about Venezuela.
Yes, shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements and the migration crisis. And we also have to address the domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But the Maduro government has also been responsible for large parts of that. Are you saying that you want the Biden administration to pull back pressure on him?
I think we need to re-examine the nature of these sanctions. There are sanctions that are very specific. For example, the Magnitsky Act sanctions that do actually focus on the decision makers and people who may be violating norms, practices, civil rights, but broad-based sanctions that punish the overall economy and harm everyday working people that are driving them into the economic and political destitution that force millions of people, both not just to the United States, but even to our regional partners. Senator,
Okay.
Yeah. Little high-low there. But I think it's worth to highlight the good first. I mean, like, what she's saying is absolutely correct. And I do think that there is like a kind of narrative or like image confusion with most people when we talk about the border, because when we talk about the border, most people think about Mexican migrants, when in fact the vast majority of the increases in migration that we've been seeing have been coming from the Northern Triangle countries and from Venezuela. So when these people are making this long journey, not only are they coming into America, a foreign and very different country, they're also going through Mexico, right, which is a very different place from a Venezuela or the Northern Triangle countries. I'm sorry, we should absolutely lift the sanctions against Venezuela. They are creating tremendous amounts of human suffering in that country, and have not. First of all, sanctions in the first place. Like, no, I'm sorry, the United States government doesn't get a say in other people's government. That's like just full stop, in my opinion. That's it. But it also hasn't been successful at delivering what the American objectives are. Which is putting in a bunch of pro-international capital and pro-American politicians into government. They failed multiple times, rejected very publicly. There's a reason that Guaido is like a meme at this point of just like a kind of weak and strange fella, is because he's not somebody who, despite his like image in America as like this freedom fighter and somebody who represents the unheard people, no, he was a representative of like elite interests within Venezuela and internationally, tried to take over the government, failed. And why are we making Venezuelans suffer? Because they didn't want a puppet government in their country. It's the height of cruelty.
Yeah, I mean, and like with sanctions, there's two types that you could say, and one I'm ambivalent about, the super targeted. I guess it depends on the circumstances, and the other is the broad. The broad sanctions that affect the people in general, which I am absolutely hostile to in pretty much any circumstance. It's hard for me to think of a thought experiment where I support that punishment, mass punishment, by association of a population. Just here's from an Al Jazeera discussion on U.S. sanctions on Venezuela here. I think this guy's name will come up here. Otherwise, I'll pull it later.
Is undergoing the largest economic contraction ever documented in any country.
This is Francisco Rodriguez, economist and professor at University of Denver.
Wartime.
Let me restart.
Largest economic contraction ever documented in any country outside of wartime. It's a contraction of 72% of its income per capita. We're talking the equivalent of 3 Great Depressions. And what the evidence shows is that a large part of this contraction can be explained by economic sanctions. Now, it's not the totality of it, but what we have to understand is that this economy is very highly dependent on oil revenues. 95% of its exports are oil, come from oil. And oil exports saw a 93% decline. And there have been several studies that have looked at the impact of sanctions on oil production and have found a very significant impact on oil production. So Venezuela is poorer right now as a result of sanctions. Now, again, sanctions are not the only driver, and Tamara is absolutely right that the situation was very complicated.
And he's there referencing one of the other people there who was very insistent on the point that while sanctions have, maybe have caused a triple Great Depression, it wasn't all great beforehand too. And you see that a lot with people criticizing Maduro, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think Maduro is a model for governance. I'm not finding like the Maduro plan to propagandize here. But guess what? America also has pretty severe poverty things, and I don't think we should have coups here either. I don't think we should have. I don't think like that makes like that. It's the same actual project. That's going to and so like we absolutely need to drop sanctions, and then. Then if we've stopped committing like economic warfare against this country, then we have more space to be dispassionate sort of critics of, civic ethics and governance and stuff like that. Like under those conditions, then we can start. And so like, she's like, you're saying Maduro's done a lot of this. You're saying we should pull back pressure? Yes. We should stop that and reset and let this country try to live up to these ideals. And then, if we aren't starving the people and contributing to depressions, then we can start having these conversations in a more honest way.
And, it's not just Venezuela, as I mentioned earlier, it's like Northern Triangle countries. And one thing that has been a little annoying, and we've covered it a lot on this program, Matt, is, I think AOC is 100% right to say, like, hey, look at the root causes. But that's almost becoming a little bit of a buzzword to basically say, hey, what we need right now is we need Microsoft and Chobani and Duolingo to come into your countries, which by the way, was the Kamala Harris plan. It was like, hey, let's get a bunch of American corporations into your country, and that's going to save the day for y'all. No, what we're talking about is pulling back these economic sanctions, giving direct support to governments, including, oh my lord, left-wing governments in Central and South America, and pulling back from this economic warfare. I mean, like the conversations that happened, particularly around Venezuela, are just bizarre. This was a year and a half ago, maybe, but do you remember that tanker drama, Matt? When it's like, oh no, Iran is sending a tanker to Venezuela to trade with them. And like, we're covering this like really closely. It's like, what the heck? It's like, what's that mean? The Jesus one, right? It's like, I consent, I don't, right? That's America, right? Being like, I don't consent to these countries being able to engage in trade. Or the long-standing saga of the Bank of England holding Venezuela's reserves. You don't own that. That is like not like, and you're pulling money out of people's pockets and making the situation worse. Which again, the reason that the United States sanctions these countries is because underlining, and I think this is where actually like you see American like political ideology so clearly, is like, absolutely, I don't even want to go through the laundry list. Like, there are plenty of issues with the Maduro government. I think that, being able to understand it in the context of a country that is like very much being strangled. My whole point on any kind of country like that has bad policies, it's like, absolutely you can like reject and even criticize some of like the democratic failures or weaknesses of states like that, right? But also understand that like bad times create bad governments in the sense of like wartime governments are bad, right? Because wartime governments, the government is like very unstable. And that's when you see much more of what's called the repressive state apparatus coming in more strongly against the people. It's not a justification or defense of that. It's saying when you create those conditions, and the point is that we're creating those wartime conditions for these countries, which creates bad results for the people. It doesn't create like revolution or anything like that. It creates very powerful governments that oftentimes like do bad things. Yeah, I mean, but sorry, the ideological argument though, Matt, is that like what are they trying to imply by like the bad policies of Maduro? When you're saying that to a public audience, is it the exchange rate, Matt? No, it's like subsidies that they're talking about that are creating these kind of issues, right? The subsidies, the escape from like free market economics. Those are the bad policies that Maduro and his government have done that are like created the crisis. And they very much want that to be the story versus like these crippling sanctions.
Right. It's not like death squads or anything like that.
they're not talking about the civil liberties. They're talking about the subsidies when they say that, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like, it's like this is like that economist said, the largest non-wartime, politics is war by other means, but non-wartime contraction of an economy. And, is Guaido still not arrested? Like, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Those conditions don't, like, I don't want to say it's all restraint, but that's some kind of restraint.
Oh, man.
Before we get, I do want to touch here, send some well wishes to Matt Christman. We should just do a little update on the UAW, though. Our boy Biden has succumbed to the pressure. Not entirely. There was so much buzz around it that you thought maybe that this was sort of setting a pretext for Biden. Nonetheless, it's the and AOC mentioned it on her Face the Nation appearance this morning. It is the first time a president has done that, which is good. I don't think it's everything. I don't think I think it could be very easily. The good of this could be very easily undone. But nonetheless, like, I'm happy to see it. So I don't know what your response is.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think the way to think about this, and like 100%, I think it's a good thing to sort of like celebrate this event, right? Not in the kind of Biden watching or something like that. To recognize that Joe Biden is doing this is because the labor movement is making demands and they're getting stronger and they have support. That is power. That is what we want, right? Yeah, of course. Biden's being absolute. I think 100%. You can call whatever you want. It's a calculated move. There is another universe where like the labor movement isn't as like militant, has been getting the gains that it's been getting recently, where Joe Biden doesn't show up. But he sees this as such a clear win for him because of the success of the labor movement in this country in the past couple of years. So see this as a win. I don't like as people who are extremely critical of Biden. I don't think we give them an inch ever, really. There's all these, for example, like the Inflation Reduction Act. Some people in our sort of world were very like, so this is good. And we were like, no, from the get-go. Right. So we're not one of these people who's like, look on the bright side or whatever. I'm saying this is a victory because it was won by working people, which is what working class politics looks like. Is getting the government to do things that we want them to do. And that's the orientation that you should take.
Because, I mean, Fain, by not endorsing, made that a liability. Because Biden can't, especially with these polls. And look, I don't want to get too into polls. I think polls could say a lot. I don't think they say good things for Biden right now. But I don't want to overinvest it with meaning. But if you go against the auto union at a time like this, after your fucking buddy, who you're president because you were his vice president, bailed out those automakers the previous time, that's a liability. So Fain used this moment to create a liability for the president of the United States. It got the president of the United States to come out and support the strike, which, I mean, if any one person you can bring to your picket line that might have an impact. I'm not sure who is more generically important than the president of the United States. So it's good. Hopefully we can make that a sort of regular demand we make of politicians. And I love to see it.
100%. So we'll be I think that'll happen on Tuesday. So I think we'll have some updates on the Tuesday main show where we have Jake from the Valley Labor Report joining us to sort of break down some of the anti-UAW propaganda. It's going to be a fun episode. So we'll see how it goes. I mean,
yeah, and I'm excited to talk to Jacob too. He always calls it a majority report and doesn't identify. We know a Jake from Alabama, like Sam knows right away it's the Valley Labor. But you got to plug the show. I mean, he eventually does, but you can call him as Jake from the Valley Labor Report.
I love that.
But let's move on to a little bit sadder news, but hopefully not too sad. Chapo was late this week and announced that Matt Christman had a medical emergency that hospitalized him. He's apparently recovering. at the same time, his partner, I'm not sure if they're married, but his partner is expecting a child any minute. And, you know, we've had Christman on this show. We've had him on TMBS. You know, I've met him in person a handful of times, not as friend socially, but like just, you know, as part of this job. And before I say what I will say, I want to play this clip because what's been running through my head is after Michael passed, I watched a lot of the stuff that people were saying, but the one that really stuck out to me was Matt in his backyard here. And I think what he says about Michael, a lot could be said about him as well. It's at the very start of the Twitch here. He's waiting for people to show.
Try to take you away from those lovely little fluffy guys down there. Apparently, those looked like Critter Chat was having a good time. But I like that during the day. Might not be able to do it this weekend. I want to try to do it today and tomorrow. If anyone's watching, which I assume they are, although I'm not getting any comments. I'll just start that. I wanted to start today by remembering Michael Brooks, who's everything everyone is saying about him is true. So I don't feel like there's any need to be redundant. Know that the outpouring of affection for him was totally warranted, and losing someone like that in that way is really scary in its own way, and reminds you just how lonely everything is. But we're still here for now, and the best way to honor him is to do what he wanted people to do, which was to, God damn it, be kind to each other. God fucking damn it, be kind.
And you can go check out, that's from the Kush vlog, 72120, if people want to watch. He goes on for a couple more minutes. And yeah, I mean, Christman, I don't know, I feel like I've seen him at like live shows, something like that. He's just a very nice guy. And that on top of, you know, there's a lot of people that are nice. He's also, what people are saying about it, I saw some people take exception with Danny Bessner calling him a philosopher. I don't know who else like qualifies. Like if Christman isn't one for this sort of or for our times, because I think and I think this is true of all the Chapo guys. I think all of them have a depth in addition to their like what surface level makes them appealing. They're very funny, but they all have a depth and can teach you something. And Christman, I mean, absolutely above all. I remember him talking about sewer socialism, I think, when TMBS. Him talking with Mike Racine about the JFK assassination. Him talking about, I was hoping we could have him on, and maybe we can in the future, about his new project on the English Civil War. Just an encyclopedia, like the type of person that I look up to. Like why I spent, like, it's the type of, why I gravitate to this space, why I gravitate to Chapo is like people that are curious around this world. And he's like, he jokes about it, and it's not entirely jokes, but that caring about politics like this is a bit of a mental illness.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely true. But there's also like community in it. And I think he was, and I don't mean to say was, like he is, and indications are he will recover. As important in sort of setting this as to be productive as it could have been. Like I think like his sort of what he's saying during the whole Bernie movement. I think, you know, you need people like Christman there to be elaborating for people. And I think the outpouring you're seeing from people who are like, he helped me understand politics. Like, you know, for a lot of people, Christman is like their Hitchens or something like that. And I think they're well off for it.
I mean, you know, Matt, we're like all pulling for you, and, you know, there's just been a tremendous outpouring of support. I think To paraphrase some things that I've been seeing, is that, the ability to express the frustration and anger that a lot of people have at the world and the state of politics in this country that he has, to be able to do that in a way that is, both righteous in the sense that he's not holding back against the ghouls or anything like that, but it's uplifting. And this isn't an angry guy. This is a guy who is angry because he does genuinely care so much for everyday and common people, that he's inspired. And I've been seeing many people saying that, and I really identify with that. As you were saying, Matt, I've met him a couple of times. We've had him on the show. I will say this is that, we interview a lot of people, and I don't mean this as an insult to anyone else. I mean this as praise to Christman. I remember we interviewed him on Joe Biden and a little bit on his President's podcast, which I'm a big fan of. He's one of those guys who I'm like, oh, holy shit, this guy is operating at a different level. This guy is incredibly astute and intelligent, and I'm very happy to sit back and listen. And on that, I'm a regular listener of his blog streams, right? Of the grill streams. I listen to them every week, and really always take something away and enjoy them, and am inspired in them, both politically and also try to mimic them in some way with the stuff we do on the show, because I always get a lot from hearing him talking. The thing about him is that going to the philosophy thing just really fast is that obviously this is a guy who knows history very well. It's very interesting to listen to about politics, but it absolutely has a philosophical character to his work, right? And that's, I think, one of the things that I love so much about the grill streams in particular, is that he's really laying out a certain kind of philosophy and view of the world. Doesn't mean 100% I'm going to be in agreement or anything like that, but I mean it's in a time when I think a lot of left-wing commentary and media and politics tends to sort of be angry and frustrated and critical. These are all really damn important things, but also has a hard time ever being really earnest, right? And being able to talk about the world and to be open. It's man, that really sucks. That breaks the heart and your soul, and be able to talk in those kind of terms, and life and death, and the ability to experience the world, and how important it is to cherish our ability to see what is around us, and to experience life in some way, and being able to talk about that kind of philosophical or spiritual crisis that I think a lot of people find themselves in. I think he is really unique in that, and I've always really appreciated his stuff, and I'm looking forward to being able to listen to more in the future, and hoping that he's getting the care that he needs. It seems like he is.
Yeah. The anger thing, someone said he seems like an angry guy, but he's just bursting with empathy, I saw somebody say. And there's people in this business, and I even see it too when I get angry. People like it.
Yeah, they do.
And there are people who are very good at being angry in front of a camera. And the point is okay, the anger speaks to you, but does it teach you anything? And with Christman, it's and like you say, he was like you say, he was very philosophical, even in a way, but even in a way that was a little bit heady for me. But I also just wanted to circle back to the amount of people upset with him or taking shots.
Can we do that for a second?
Which is such to me, it's because it reminds me of when people I'd see, and there was less of it with Michael, because Michael was a bit more of a diplomat, but there was still it. And to me, it's please continue to debase yourself, continue to show yourself, because especially with Christman here, it's everybody that is pissed at him deserved everything that Christman aimed at them during his life. And that to me is that's there's nothing inconsistent with being kind, because being kind to a certain type of person in media for the sake of being kind sends a wrong message to the people who those people are unkind to in mass.
I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, just really fast, if we could, for fun, let's do a quick little sociological study on these groups, because I think there's two main ones, right? The first one is because Chris Hayes sent out some praise for him, which means that like all the liberals are fucking furious because they're so worked up about Ukraine that they can't even hear something, which is not just like a joke. It's actually a funny joke that he tweeted out about the fact that it's unconscionable that we're sending irradiated munitions into the country, which are going to plague people living there forever. They see that as like making light of a situation instead of putting up a mirror against inhumanity of like mainstream positions on this conflict. So there's those people. There's the media figures who they've been digging at forever, and for the most part have been fairly, at least some of them have been fairly gracious and hilarious.
Rod Dreher.
Dreher was very funny. So that's sort of, in one thing. But the one that is the most kind of fascinating to me, and I think the most pathetic, it's even more pathetic than the liberals, man, I gotta say, is the people who, for whatever reason, decided in 2016 that actually like the real left shouldn't like line up behind Bernie, and like the real left-wing position is to support like a Hillary Clinton. And those people who have been able to live their entire lives and consider themselves to be on the left, and they even call themselves socialists or all this stuff, when they actually saw some proto-democratic socialist politics coming up in this country, they were disgusted by it. Mm-hmm. And then became more and more and more mad as time went on that they were being pushed further and further into the margins and told that, no, it's not a radical position to be against this movement. And in fact, like a lot of the stuff that you've been arguing for isn't that radical in the first place. Those are the ones who I think have been the most pathetic to watch, and it's actually a little bit of a little nostalgia trip to see them getting dunked on again after.
And I can't wait for whenever Christman is back from hiatus for them to take a look at some of those, because that'd be very funny.
Yes, I really can't look. I can't wait for it. So, and also just so everyone, we're all sending good feelings toward Matt. And to everybody in his community at Chapo and close friends and stuff. I will just say, and I know this is to like our patron audience, but I just want to remind people, you really like give people their privacy and be normal. Don't be trying to dig for information from folks. When things come out, they'll come out at a time that people are comfortable with it. I will just say from Matt and I's personal experience, it's like having a little bit of grace and understanding that like, well, look, Matt, I've met Matt Christman a few times, right? But I don't know him personally. I wouldn't say that he's like a friend of mine, right? I don't have that relationship with him in any way, right? Yeah. I'm like y'all in this of seeing somebody who I admire and I look up to in pain, and I hope that he's better, and it makes me sad. But knowing where your boundary is between like your interaction with somebody in a kind of mediated media sense, and like that they are a human being, and they have all of those needs, and sometimes that line, it gets crossed all the time. And I think especially when you work in certain kinds of media, and also if you do work like Matt Christman does, where he's talking about life and death and all these things, and you feel a connection to that kind of person, know that this is one way. And like you have to have these kind of boundaries, and I think that it's really, and not just boundaries with like Matt immediately and like the people directly around him, like the people who also sort of know him in the exterior, his friends, like you might know somebody who does know Matt, like you got to give those people space and privacy too, because unfortunately this always happens when something like this, and I understand where it comes from. You want to know, you want to like show your support and things like that, but know that people are people outside of the things that they do on camera. And I think it's an important thing to keep in mind, because unfortunately it gets forgotten a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So get well soon, Matt Christman, and good luck to the family, and prayers up for everybody involved and all Chapo boys. Yeah. Folks, we are going to be back, as we said. Jake from Val Labor Report, excited to talk to him again. We'll see if see how Biden's trip to the picket line goes. Union Joe.
I hope he wears his bathing suit.
Also, I do want to flag AOC. You do need to lose that Tesla. You got to lose that Tesla.
Oh, does she got the Tesla?
She said she is, so that's good.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, can't be driving that. Anyway, folks, I'll see you on Tuesday.